What's going on, everyone? It is me, Lone, and I'm here to talk about Dishonored 2. This is a game that I'm really excited to get. I already pre-ordered the collector's edition. It's really expensive in Australia, like $190, but it's coming out on November 11th of this year. Super excited. I played the original Dishonored. I love that game, all but one aspect. Now, I'm not saying I hated this particular aspect. I just think that it could be improved vastly for Dishonored 2 to make it potentially an amazing game. And what is that aspect? It is story. Now, probably fairly so, a lot of you will think that I judge games too harshly in terms of story. After all, it isn't necessary, it isn't completely necessary for a video game to have a great story to be a good game. I definitely understand that. After all, games at the end of the day are largely underpinned by gameplay. So long as the gameplay is fun, even if you did not have any story or had a very little underarching story or perhaps a very weak story, so long as the gameplay is fun, most people will be happy with that. They'll play the game through, they'll have a good time, similar with Doom, for example. And the game can still get high reviews, get critical praise, loved by the fans, etc. So I'm definitely not saying that story is 100% necessary in all cases. Games are games, and so long as the gameplay is fun, then you'll get a good game in the end. And Dishonored 1 definitely did this really well. The fact that you could play this game both in a complete anarchist role, killing everyone and killing your main targets, or be much more passive and be much more stealthy and deciding not to kill your targets. The gameplay is a lot of fun, and it also promotes and encourages multiple playthroughs, which I think is excellent. And Dishonored 2 is going down a very similar route because not only can you play, seemingly anyways, in both a passive or good route and an anarchist route, you can also play as two different characters in the form of Emily and in the form of Corvo. So this game is going to have a lot of replayability. The new powers that Emily has seem really cool. The gameplay looks super fun. It looks just as good or even better than the original Dishonored game. So look, all of that I definitely appreciate, and I'm not saying that story is absolutely necessary in every single video game. However, I've long said that a great story in a game can turn a good game to a great game and a great game to a perfect game. It's not absolutely necessary, but it can add so much more to a game, especially if that game is a single player game that does have some sort of a story to it. When a game does have a good story or a great story on top of really solid gameplay, that makes me remember that game and value that game and hold that game in a much higher regard because of the fact that it had a great story that made me feel, that made me think, that triggered my emotions, that left me tingling at the end of the story, that had a bunch of twists and turns. That's what a great story can do for me personally, and I know others feel that way as well. But when I think back to the original Dishonored, I don't remember that game because of the great story that it had. To be honest, the story was just okay. The lore in the game was fantastic, the history in the game is fantastic, the environmental storytelling in the game I thought was really good as well. The characters, the world, the setting, it was all really good. And there was a story in that game that started off really well, but in the end, it turned out to just be okay. It wasn't a bad story, it wasn't horrible like some people would say. To me personally, it was just okay. And I thought it could have been much better. And I thought that there was a lot of room for improvement in that regard. And any game has room for improvement. Obviously, I'm not going to be a complete cynic. I understand that any game can improve in many different ways. The original Dishonored was a great all-around game. At the time, and still to this day, I just think that the one aspect of that game that could be improved to turn it to an amazing game, to an incredible game, was the story. So this is why I'm bringing this up now, because Dishonored 2 again is coming out in November of this year. What I would like to see is that game focus more on its story and to tell an amazing story. Of course, I'd love it to keep doing everything that it did well in the original Dishonored game, in terms of gameplay, in terms of interesting characters, in terms of the world and the interesting setting. I hope that it does all of those things really well. But if on top of that, it can tell an amazing story and leave me wanting more, then that's going to make it an absolutely brilliant game to me. And that's what I wanted from the original Dishonored. And I think they have the real potential to do this, especially because Emily Caldwin is going to be a playable character. We know the upbringing she had in the original Dishonored. We know the trauma she experienced as a child with, spoiler alert, her mother being killed at the beginning of the game and Corvo trying to get back his reputation. While he did that in the end, and eventually, as we've seen in the trailers for Dishonored 2, Emily is now Empress. I don't feel like, in my opinion, we got much closure in terms of it was the fact that her mother was killed. Now, there are some rumors, and I think it's confirmed, I'm not too sure at this stage, that Corvo is actually Emily's father. We don't know that for sure yet, but regardless, at least from what we saw in the original Dishonored, we saw Emily's mother be killed and Corvo trying to redeem himself. Corvo redeemed himself, but I can't help but feel that Emily has not got over that fact. So I think Emily has a great history in terms of interesting storytelling, not because her mother died, but the ground is really fertile using Emily as a platform to tell an amazing story, and I hope Dishonored 2 does that. Again, doing everything it does right in terms of gameplay and setting. If it tells an amazing story, it'll turn the game from a great game to an amazing game, or to an even better game. That's what I hope from the original Dishonored, and that's what I hope for Dishonored 2. Especially because this game has such interesting lore and just an interesting world in general. So anyways guys, I would love to get your thoughts about what you would like to see Dishonored 2 do when it's released on November 11th of this year. Would you like to see it focus on story, or do you think it doesn't really matter? Would you like to see the game improve in other areas? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourself, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.